Part 3, hidden collateral damage. Now we'll look deeper into the psyche of people and what arguably has happened to us by being put through this model. Latest neuroscience, being told off before you are old enough to understand the reasons why causes physical brain damage to the hippocampus. Now obviously there are some nasty pasty parents out there who are putting their boys and girls through this. They suffered at the hands of their own parents, so history is repeating itself. There's a self-perpetuating aspect to everything. And that's another thing that we're going through. Humanity is putting a stop to this loop that we've been in. We have to cut the biofeedback loop. Stop assuming, stop presuming, and stop repeating negative, self-harmful thoughts and behavior patterns. Children need responsive adults to develop emotionally. Well, I shouldn't even have to say that. It should go without saying. Cold, unresponsive caregivers create dysfunction in a child's brain chemistry. This is more than an idea. This is chemistry. This is body chemistry. Your body chemistry changes if at a vulnerable age you're not being given the love and the attention and the care that you need. Specifically, the dysfunction that arises is in dopamine reception. Dopamine receptors, that's pleasure and reward. So that means that you're going to grow up needing bigger and more powerful hits to feel the pleasure and reward, because earlier on in life your pleasure and reward centers were partially or even maybe totally deactivated. So you're going to need the alcohol and the legal highs and the dope or whatever, or the dangerous activities or the gambling. You're going to need those because life has just become too grey. That greyness I can relate to. And I did gamble for a while, and I've never been a drinker particularly, but so I did self-harming things, never been a major self-harmer, so which is why I came through okay eventually. But most people are self-harming most of the time if you look at them objectively, and it's because their dopamine receptors have been compromised. The outcome is broken, disaffected and addicted children who need pleasure-fueled dopamine rush for pain avoidance. That's what we need, pain avoidance. And that's why a lot of people wear the mask and took the jab. Pain avoidance. Pain avoidance for cheap pleasure seeking, such as, obviously this is not an exhaustive list, and these are the things that we're moving away from. And in my 2024 talk called Building Resilience, I will give pointers about why we need to move away from these things and how best to do it. So we're moving away from television, junk food and drink. If you see a parent taking a boy or girl to Subway, McDonald's, or there's a few others, other crappy food outlets are available, I think that's child abuse. Junk food and drink, sugar, alcohol, gambling, porn, sex, drugs, medications, consumerism, rock and roll, loud music, loud, heavy, metallic music to drown the pain. We've all been there. I used to love loud music to drown out the pain. Consumerism, retail therapy, gossip. And another way you can tell that people are growing is they've stopped watching the soap operas, because soap operas just glorified gossip. Gadget and internet abuse, gangs and delinquency, just some manifestations of the dysfunction that we inherit from crappy parenting and crappy schooling. Seeking regular dopamine hits downregulates, so it's not just bad news, it's worse news. Seeking out these hits to drown the pain will downregulate serotonin, which is your happy hormone, and oxytocin, which is your bonding feel-good hormone. So you get a vicious cycle that kicks in. You're feeling shit, so you do shit, which makes you feel even shittier. Thank you, Dr. David. And if you add up all these traumas, this is what you get. You get complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which goes back to the schooling model. I asked a waitress randomly, how was your schooling? I was with a friend talking about the book over lunch, and she said, oh, it was wonderful, had a great time in school. I said, are you sure? Because I thought, I'm not taking that bollocks. So I just said, are you sure? And she went away with a puzzled look. She came back 10 minutes later and she said, do you know what? When you asked me again, I thought about it more deeply, and my first answer was just my reflex answer based on my memory of my friends. But then my real answer, she said, is school was a nightmare. It was horrendous. School itself, not the friends that you made us with, the school itself. So it's the classroom environment. And one of the reasons why they've cut down on play breaks and play opportunities, and they disrupt boys and girls when they are actually making friends and kind of having a bit of fun, is because they want to maximize the evil of the classroom and minimize the compensatory effect of having made friends and having a bit of fun in the playground. We're dealing with an evil that we can't comprehend, folks. This is not random. It's not mismanagement of the human resource. This is a takedown of humanity. It's a takedown. I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm just not. This is a takedown. This is it. This is end times takedown. The quicker you realise that, the better. And we can add to the troops who are the resistance. More about that later. Schooling model, as we know it, gives you a kind of low-grade post-traumatic disorder that you're not aware of because everyone went to school and everyone moved on and you've forgotten. You get this amnesia. Your brain is kind to you. It doesn't dwell on the negative, doesn't dwell on the hurts. Your body doesn't forget, but your brain, your mind will let it go so you can move on. The hurt, the resentment, the humiliations, the suffering, the indignation, whatever, is still retained in the body and it's still reverberating, which is why we need the loud music, the drugs, the sex, the this, that, the other to calm it down for a little while. But we're just hopping from one piece of escapism to another. The bits in the middle are where the nightmare persists. Now, if you are one of these, it's not just low-grade post-traumatic stress disorder that you're not aware of, which is why we call it complex. It's full-on child abuse or full-on post-traumatic stress disorder. If you were an HSP or R, which is highly sensitive person, a liminal, which is someone that can't be put into a pigeonhole, they don't know how to deal with you because you've got so many gifts and talents and so you're so multidimensional. When they say science or arts, and you say, oh, I'll have both, please. French or German, I'll have both, please. What? No, it's one or the other. No, I want both. That's liminal. Good at everything. Introvert. This is an extrovert grinder. They're grinding out extroverts. No place for the introvert. They have glass corridors. Introverts need quiet, sacred time out. You can't get it in a school. And if you try that, that's when they want to put you on medication. What's the matter with you? You're not talking. There's nothing the matter with a boy, girl, man or woman that are not talking. They are reflecting. They are introverts. But we're not taught about introverts. Of course we're not. Because that would be of practical use or value. Do you get it yet? Gifted and talented. Well, if you happen to have a teacher that's kind of a bit of an idiot, the first thing that will happen to you when you demonstrate, and there's plenty of examples in the book, when you demonstrate a gift or a talent, is the teacher will try and sabotage it or sabotage you. And it's called dream stealing. And it's a phenomenon. Very common. I don't know how common, but it's common. Dyslexic. Now, the freedom movement is made up of a massive percentage of dyslexic people. They're the ones that have escaped a lot of the indoctrination because they couldn't read properly and they couldn't write properly, etc., etc. So they haven't repeated the lies as much as those without dyslexia. Non-academic. Well, if you're not destined to work with words or ideas or be a teacher yourself, then you are literally wasting time. Every minute spent in a classroom is a waste of your precious time. If you're destined to be a plumber, a carpenter, an actor, a singer, a gymnast, a swimmer, you are wasting your time. As soon as you can read or write, you should be released out of captivity into the world. That's the only purpose that I can see in schooling, making sure that you are literate and numerate. Once you're literate and numerate, that's it. Because being literate and numerate doesn't necessarily mean you've been indoctrinated. You've been given a skill. I had that skill before I went to school. I was already talking before I was 1. I was reading when I was 3 or 4. And I was counting when I was 5 or 6. I didn't really need to go to school at all. In fact, I was shunted from my first school because they said, this boy's too quick. So they said, take him to another school. Easy targets, tall poppies. If your boy starts to excel, he could become the tall poppy, and the tall poppy is the one that gets its head cut off so that the poppy field looks correct. More neuroscience. Classrooms are full of stress, fear and anxiety, known to produce cortisol and known to lower intelligence. Because when you're stressed and anxious, you come out of your neofrontal cortex, your Spock brain, where you can think rationally, into the fear brain, the mammalian, reptilian part of the brain, where, again, you'll take a jab because you can't think straight. You'll put on a mask because you can't think straight. And putting on a mask doesn't exactly help the thinking because you need oxygen to think. Immunity. All kinds of immunity. If you're stressed, your immune level's low. So the mainstream propaganda machine ramps up the fear porn, ramps up the stress and anxiety, ramps up the fear, and now people are more susceptible to what we used to call colds, flus and pneumonias, but were eliminated and rebranded 3 years ago. Remember that? It was a rebrand. It wasn't a phenomenon, it was a rebrand. Empathy. They've done loads of experiments on mice and kids. If you want to reduce empathy, you stress people out. So if they're in a group that's stressed and they've got the mask to show how stressed they are, they're not going to come up to you and shake your hand. Oh, you're my hero, tell me how you do it. How do you live a life without a mask on? You're an alien to them. So just as you were an alien in the classroom when you were in class 1A, all the people in class 1B were aliens. So you had no empathy. You didn't have that much empathy for the people in class 1A, to be honest, but you had zero empathy for those in 1B. Divide and conquer. Get them to compete, get them to only see, or to hardly see beyond their nose. Longevity. Stressed people do not live as long. And then they throw in this pseudo-biblical quote about 70 years and 10. That's your education is supposed to last. There was a misquote that happened. Your education is supposed to last 70 years and 10, not your life. You mature at 70. You don't die at 70, you mature at 70. You're supposed to live another 80 or 90 years beyond 70. Certainly another 70, so 70 years of education, 70 years of life. And there's a tribe in Pakistan, the Hunza tribe. They tend to live to 140, 150, or even 160, 70, 80. That's what we should be living to. Not dying at 70, 75. You know, someone dies at 80 and, oh, they had a long, good long innings. Good long innings, my arse. I aim to be playing five-a-side football till I'm way past 90. Seriously, I haven't played it for a little while because I've been too busy. But I'm going to get back into five-a-side football and play until maybe even 100. If you don't do it, you lose it. I'm temporising with table tennis. That's keeping me going. I move around the table like a spring chicken. And that's not a boast, that's just a fact. I can't hit the sodding ball, but at least I move around like a spring chicken. Right? It's not the point. Ideally, I'd also hit the ball well, but there you go, that's another day's work. Right? Fun, folks. It's fun that will see you live a long, productive, healthy life. Stress is killing people. It's depleting them of life, joy, and empathy. More about that in 2024 talk, Building Resilience. Adverse childhood experience, ACEs. You should know about these. This should be common knowledge. It isn't. Every time I ask an audience, very, very few people have heard of ACEs. Adverse childhood experience. The system accepts that the death of a parent, the divorce of the parent, illness, serious illness of a parent, or maybe sibling as well. Incarceration of a parent is an adverse childhood experience that can lead to long-term problems, long-term trauma, chronic disease. But they leave out, in my opinion, what is arguably the most potent ace of all, which is, of course, schooling. Now, why do I say that schooling is more powerful an adverse event than even the death of a parent? Well, the reason I say this is because the death of a parent is obvious, it's traumatic, but eventually time heals it and you will move on. But schooling, we're not aware, it's the nescience, is it? We don't know what's been done to us, so we never really move on. So on that playing field alone, although you may say it's not a level playing field, I would say that schooling does more harm. Because it certainly does more harm to more people, quantitatively, because only a small proportion of young people lose their parents. But nearly all young people go to school and suffer complex PTSD. The latest figures suggest that 25%, 1 in 4 children now have chronic mental health disease. 1 in 4. And I was listening to TNT radio this morning, and I heard that 1 in 10 of older teens in the UK, 1 in 10 are taking prescribed antidepressants. 1 in 10. And the same proportion have attempted or considered suicide. This is one of the pandemics. If you Google "school makes me," you'll see, and try this, if you don't believe me, I've tried it, this is what happens. It comes up with depressed, hate myself, feel stupid, feel sick, feel anxious, cry, etc., etc. I tried this on DuckDuckGo just to see if I got something similar, and I did. It wouldn't let me meme it. I couldn't snip and copy it for some reason, so you have to take my word for it. But it reiterated these outcomes. But there was one more. School makes me want to KMS. School makes me want to kill myself, which was on DuckDuckGo. So the people on DuckDuckGo are even more depressed than the people on Google. Draw your own conclusions. What else can we expect when we send our precious boys and girls to a corporate for-profit boot camp? Does school get all the blame? I'd love to blame everything on schooling, but you can't really. There's other factors. There's a factor such as medicalised traumatising births. I'm just throwing these in so that you don't think I've just got one idea and I'm ignoring all the others. Medicalised births. We shouldn't be born in a hospital. We should be born at home. Medicine women, natural birthers, should be in charge of a natural birth. And it's not meant to be painful, by the way. Just thought I'd throw in. I know I'm a bloke, and I'm not supposed to say these things, but it's not meant to be painful. It's that they put you in the wrong position to give birth. I'll leave it there. So we all get off to a bad start. Well, nearly all of us. A traumatised boy or girl from the traumatic birth is then taken to school for the first time. Now, other traumas could have come along. Dad could be a drunk and mum could be on some serious drug, whatever, or just neglectful parents. But, assuming all things equal, they take this traumatised boy or girl to school for the first time. What does that represent to someone as young as 4, 5 or 6, or 7 or 8 or 9? What does it represent? Yes, it represents abandonment, yeah. So, you're traumatised at birth, you may then be traumatised post-birth. Mum may be on antidepressants because the implications of having given birth have now hit hard, and they're not prepared for it. There's no birthing classes at school, there's no parenting classes at school. It's all sex. There's no love and family values. So it's the beast giving the education, the so-called education. It's not the angel, it's the demon giving the education, so-called education. So we feel abandoned. That abandonment can stick with us and can be a massive package, part of that post-traumatic stress disorder, because you're now down and the school can now kick you. So you could argue it wasn't the school that gave you the first kick. It was the birthing process, then your parents' abandonment. But it just makes it easier. You're more controllable because you're down. Now, that abandonment is never forgotten or forgiven on some level by most people. 50 years later, guess what? You go to your mum or dad, and they're now 80 odd. Mum, Dad, I've got great news. What's that? Found you a home. Isn't karma a bit of a bitch? Well, in brackets, you abandoned me when I was 6, and now that you're 80, why the bleeding hell should I not abandon you? Now, obviously, consciously, you probably aren't thinking those thoughts, but somewhere in your system, there's a kind of, well, Lord giveth, Lord taketh away. You know, expectations kick in. They're very, very low earlier on in life, and they don't get any higher later on. And again, we call ourselves a civilization, first world country. Are we bollocks? There are many countries in the world that, if you told them that we abandon our kids when they're young and then abandon our elderly when they're old, they would say, well, excuse me, pardon? And that was first brought home to me 40 years ago when an African man came to this country. And the woman I was sharing with, they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and he said to us both, he said, how come you abandon your elderly when they get old? And I didn't realise about the school abandonment then. This is way before I awakened to that. And he was absolutely right. It made us think. Why do we do it? We don't have a reason. The most compassionate thing you could say is that we're so stressed and enmeshed in the system that we don't have the empathy. We're running dry on empathy. And it's dog eat dog, every man and woman for themselves, isn't it? Well, it's your fault you've reached old age. You could have died sooner and given us all a break. Now, I'm being facetious now, but those aren't my real thoughts. But I'm just taking it to an extreme. But to be honest, that's probably the attitude of some people out there who have got zero empathy for their own parents for whatever reason. Can you see now how we might develop phobias and disabilities such as counting phobias, reading phobias, thinking disabilities, speaking, learning, singing, socializing, questioning, excelling, facing authority, reality. I used to run a Facebook page called Reality Check because I was seeing all these Facebook memes and I was thinking, this is just surreal, they're just nonsense. So I created a page that had something a bit more reliable and a bit more straight up and down, a bit more objective. And I was clearly over the target because I was one day about 4 years ago, pre-CV19, pre that, and I was thrown off Facebook. No reason given, just deleted. Boom, woke up one morning, gone. And the same thing happened more recently with PayPal. So I must be over the target. And creativity. A NASA experiment on creative genius in boys and girls was carried out over a 10-year period, which makes it longitudinal, from 2005 to 2015. And at the age of 5, they put boys and girls, there was 1,600, I think, 1,600. So no control group, it was just anecdotal and using, because you can't study humans. We're too complex. We don't fit. We're all liminals, to be honest. We don't fit into words, boxes, phrases, numbers. That's the whole point. But the beast, which ultimately is artificial, AI to the nth degree, is trying to fit us into a model, into something that it can size up and analyse and evaluate. Well, it's not happening, Mr. Beast or Mrs. Beast. It's just not happening. We're too complex. So, bearing that in mind, they did a study and found that nearly all kids aged 5, certainly out of those 1,600, were classified as creative genius. After 5 years of schooling, that number, so nearly all, had dropped to barely a third were now geniuses at the age of 10. After another 5 years of schooling, it was barely 1 in 10. So almost 9 out of 10, after 10 years of schooling, had lost their creative genius, their ability to imagine. And one of the defining features of humanity is the ability to create the future using imagination. Therefore, if you believe that artificial intelligence is endeavouring to create a future for us, then it needs to curtail our imagination so that we will settle for the software version of the future app, rather than the future conceived by us. So remove our imagination and you've almost got us defeated. Well, in fact, you have got us defeated, because it means that we can no longer create the future. We have to rely on the cabal, the globalists, creating the future for us. There you go. Blocks of wood, little trunks, go to school, and the teacher is the axe that's going to shape them. There you go. Off you go, little Jimmy or little Sarah. Get yourself shaped. Now, that could be totally intentional and desired by a psychopathic, narcissistic, sociopathic, apathetic parent. It's all good. And that's why we're having a division, because there's them and there's us. Now, there's a lot of people in the conscious movement just cringe when I do that, but tough shit. We are not all the same. We are not built the same. We don't have the same future. We don't have the same past. Vive la différence, as the French say. And the French know a thing or two. They certainly know how to wear a yellow vest. Les gilets jaunes, bless them. They're showing us the way forward. Standing up to tyranny. So this particular type of parent, I don't talk to, I don't address. They will just laugh at everything I say, you know. Oh, you're dangerous, you are. Or you're a nutter. Oh, you're one of them conspiracy theorists. Do you know, I had a conversation with someone recently, and this shows great hope. She called me a conspiracy theorist, and then just for the first time ever, I actually challenged her on the phrase. I said, excuse me, but what do you mean by conspiracy theorist? And she looked up and down for about 10 seconds, and she said, I don't know. And then I said to her, so are you telling me that you're accusing me of something and you don't even know what you're accusing me of? So you're prepared to reject me, criticize me, downgrade me, using a label whose meaning you don't even know. I said, how compassionate does that sound? And she said, do you know what? I've always thought of myself as compassionate, but I'm obviously not as compassionate as I thought I was. But just for once, I actually reached out and she reached back. So, this downgrading of imagination and creativity ends up affecting people in the adult working population. And by the time they get to adult working age, almost all of them have now got their imagination obliterated, seriously compromised. So you go into school at the age of 5-ish, and nearly all of us are imaginative and creative. That's how kids are so amazing and inspiring. They can just create a life. Give a kid an empty box in an empty room, and they create a 3-act drama. Give an adult an empty box in an empty room, and you will need social workers, medication, maybe even police, right? So, in other words, before they get traumatized, they're amazing. After they've been traumatized, it's us, it's adults that need the kid glove treatment, because we're the ones that are F-U-C-K-E-D. But the kids, they're untouched, most of them anyway. Leave them alone. Leave them untouched. Go to school, school age, nearly all imaginative, creative. By the time they go to work, nearly all brain dead. And it is called MBD, minimal brain damage. The loss of creativity is a form of brain damage. And you have to look at it like that. I should know, I had MBD as well. I lost a lot of creativity along the way. So I've had to claw some of it back. I'm playing catch up on so many levels, it's just ridiculous. The biopsychosocial is only part of the issue. What about truth? Where do we hold our deeper truths? And I'm giving you a clue.
In the body.
Yes, in the body. That's where you hold your deeper truths. Your traumas are the good bits and the bad bits. The traumas, the information that you need to keep moving forward, positive and negative. You hold it in the body. Now then, a chronically stressed or traumatized boy or girl can end up disassociating from that body. How do I know? Well, it happened to me. From the age of about 12, 13, 14 to the age of about 32, 33, 34, I was out of my body. I was disassociated. Now, if you go too far, that could be called death. but it's like a little shimmer that can last a few minutes or decades. And that's the greyness. That coincided with the greyness. So my soul did a little flip, just a little boop, yeah? And a lot of the colour and passion and enthusiasm went out of life. And only came back when I went to Spain in my early 30s and recovered the joy of living that I'd lost in this country. So you can become disassociated. Disassociated out of body. It's another way of saying out of body. So my late teens and 20s and first 1 or 2 years of 30s were out of body. They were experienced out of body. Out of body experiences. And so I would argue that schooling, therefore, for many boys and girls, without realising it, is particularly for those liminals, highly sensitives, and all the other ones that are more prone to being damaged by the model, the schooling model. Introverts, gifted, talented, etc., etc. So it's an out-of-body experience. Out-of-body means, another way of expressing that idea is alienated from self, removed from truth. Guess what can happen when we leave our body empty and open? In a word beginning with P, possession. You can get possessed. Now, Hollywood would make you think that possession is a dramatic event with spinning heads and vomit all over the place. Possession just means that the real you has gone for a little walk, and while you went for a walk, something else crept in. It could be an ideology. It could be a bad habit. It could be wicked thoughts. Anything. It could be BBC. Anything. Took over. Something took over. In other words, you abandoned ship, and something or someone else then took over the helm of the ship. Something else took over the authority of your ship. The helm. That will explain how people come to do things that years later they don't know why they did them. It could explain further down the line why people come to us, if they do come to us and say, I didn't realise how wrong I was when I took the jab and wore a mask. Because something has brought them back into their body. If that doesn't happen, then they're never going to apologise. They're just going to keep taking jabs until they finish themselves off. If they do turn the ship around, it's because somewhere along the line they went back into their body. And the worst two curses of all, as a result of all this trauma, stress, out-of-body experience, is groupthink and normality. Because if you're out of your body, you're potentially controlled by the group, by the consensus. You've lost your individuality. So you get groupthink and you get normality. So the norm is made up of people who are out of their body. Just my take on what the process is that makes entire cohorts of people do insane things and justify them with this moral righteousness, which isn't moral at all, and it's not righteous at all. So something has taken them over, or someone, and according to Matthias Desmet, he calls it mass formation hypnosis or mass formation psychosis. So this process has a name, and the name where Matthias Desmet comes in, I think he comes in at the effect. He does kind of talk about the cause, but he talks more about the effect. So if you add my analysis of the possible cause to his brilliant analysis of the effect, maybe we're getting somewhere. Experiments have been done to show the kind of thing that you get when people are not in their centre, fully in their body. The Milgram experiment showed that people would prefer to obey the white coat than their own conscience and press a lethal electrical jolt, which isn't actually lethal, but they're told that it is. That's Milgram. Ash is where a group of people swear that line A is different to line B and C, but our hero, our subject, can see that line A is the same, or it may be the other way around. And that's the conformity experiment. And in the end, our subject agrees with the group, even though he can see that what he's saying is wrong, but he doesn't want to be left out of the group. So this is mass formation. And then the Stanford experiment is when ordinary people are given roles to play, prison guards and prisoners, and the ones who play the role of prison guards end up displaying psychopathy, sadism, etc., etc. This is how we can easily be led astray. And the way I look at it is that if that's true, and it certainly is true according to these experiments and to the CV19 experiments, and that's all it was, it was a global psychological experiment, that's all it was, then it means that all the people that fell for it had lost sight of their truth and drifted out of their centre, were out of their body. And the mainstream narrative then jumped in and controlled their body movements and their thoughts. Maybe I've got those the wrong way around. Thoughts, then movements. Traumatized energies can be switched so that good is bad and bad is good. So that's another factor that you won't hear very often. If you're traumatized, your left can be right, your up can be down, your good can be bad, your bad can be good. Well, I've worked with healers who've given the most amazing products to people and it's made them sick. And then one day we all worked out, hang on a minute, if your energies are switched, then the body is now being poisoned by something that's natural and wonderful. If we are reversed, if our energies are reversed, we're up against it. So now, if you're reversed, the injection is a lifesaver. The mask, it will save Granny. See how it works? It's all been reversed. And the conspiracy nut who's going on marches and telling you that you're a nut is dangerous. When on the Million Man Woman March, there was a woman standing at the corner, this is on Oxford Street, and she was effing and jeffing. I said, what's up? She said, first of all, she didn't know what was going on. I had to explain. This is a Million Man Woman March because we don't believe in lockdowns or nonsense. And she said, I hope they all get it and die. Reversed. Everything's reversed. She now hates the people that she should love and admire. And she now wants them to die from something that doesn't even exist. It's just insanity. You know, I was looking at, that was the purest example of insanity I had ever experienced in my flesh. More prone to leading lives based on monumental lies. If you've been taken over, then you can be led astray and led to live a life of a lie. You're hollowed out by schooling, or if we're hollowed out by schooling, as schooling tends to do, we need a script. And all those people, politicians, lawyers, teachers, doctors, nurses, dentists, scientists, media operatives, what do they all have in common? They all work from a script.